Well, good evening and happy Monday. We're enjoying ours, and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The battle over health care is far from over, but already a big chunk of the left has had a full psychotic break. Sounds like overstatement, but it's real, as you'll see, at the prospect of Obamacare's repeal. Just yesterday, Andrea Mitchell of NBC went on Meet the Press and suggested the American Health Care Act was somehow a scheme by white men to destroy everybody else. Watch.
Well, let's talk about women. I mean, when we looked at the Rose Garden and the celebration of this on Thursday, they were all, mostly all men, and white men at that. There was no diversity there.
Ooh, white men, the worst kind. And then there was Kurt Eichenwald. Remember him? How can we forget? He dropped the screed on Twitter. Quote, as one with a pre-existing condition, I hope every GOPer who voted for Trump Care sees a family member get a long-term condition, lose insurance, and die. When asked why he wanted people to die for his political beliefs, Eichenwald added this charmingly, because I want them to be tortured. Keep in mind, Kurt Eichenwald works at MSNBC now. Even Eichenwald's venom, though, was exceeded by that of singer and actress Bette Midler. She tweeted this, quote, so the homegrown Assads in the Freedom Caucus want employers to not have to offer health care to employees like gassing their own people! Exclamation point. Just like that. And finally, there's Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of Michigan, who, like Mitchell, was very hung up on the whiteness of Republican lawmakers trying to change health care. Here she is.
I just sort of watched in shock the picture in the Rose Garden after what happened on the House. I really wanted to cry. And when I say it's not a game yet, they are treating it like a game. But for the people that I represent and for people across the country, it's not a game. And that's the point that I was trying to make. And then when you hear, you see that picture in the Rose Garden, you realize who it is that is celebrating this. And then hear that it's the 13 white boys, sorry to say it that way, that are going to be doing this in the Senate. I get very concerned.
The white boys. Well, this is clearly no longer a debate over policy about health care or anything else. It's something else entirely different. But what exactly is it? Don Calloway is a Democratic strategist and former Missouri state representative, and he joins us tonight to perhaps explain. Don, great to have you tonight.
Thank you for having me, Tucker.
So, if you can kind of imagine a scenario in which, or maybe you can't, but let me throw this up there, there were, I don't know, 13 Filipino lawmakers voting on a piece of legislation. You had a sitting member of Congress go on television and say, you know what? Filipinos doing this. Right. That's appalling. I don't think she'd get very far, would she?
I don't know, but that's a hypothetical. But the reality of the matter is that the Republican Party at its highest ranks of leadership has a diversity problem. And lack of diversity, be it ideological diversity, gender diversity, or racial diversity, makes us all poorer because you're not necessarily getting the diversity of perspective that one needs when attacking something as big as infrastructure, tax reform, or health care. These are big challenges.
Yeah, pardon me when I laugh.
No, well,
coming from the Democratic Party, which just announced that anyone who disagrees with them on Roe v. Wade can't be a member of the party, telling me that diversity is lacking. But here's the difference.
That's not exactly true.
Look, we can have different views on things. We choose to have the views that we have.
Right.
We don't choose to be the color that we are.
We don't.
It's something that happens to us. And so the agreement we've had for a long time, and it's a good agreement, is that we're not going to judge people on things they can't control, accidents of birth, including race. And so what does this have to do with the health care bill?
The thing that has to do with the health care bill is that you don't choose to be white. I didn't choose to be African American, but you do choose who your party leadership is. And writ large, the Republican Party has chosen to have 13 white men in the room when creating a system that will control 1/5 to 1/6 of our nation's economy. That is a tangible choice made by the Republican Party. It's a tangible choice made by the Trump administration to have a room full of white men deciding on women's health.
Well, I don't know. Listen, a room full of white men decided Obamacare. It was the majority white Democratic caucus that passed that bill. Yes, it was. Well, the Democratic caucus is majority white, but hold on. Why is that? And I'm not being, look, it's not about what color I am or what you are. It's about the principle that you ought to judge people for what they do and say, the decisions that you make, rather than by the color of their skin. But almost by the content of their character, you could say. So
you could say.
Why is it bad that these people are a specific color? Does that color make it hard for you to make wise decisions?
No, it doesn't, but it represents a lack of diversity of perspective. And that lack of diversity of perspective, it's hard to think that they're making the best policy for our entire country. You and I live in Washington, D.C. We can't walk 6 blocks without seeing a variety of rainbows of shades of all different types of folks. And that is a microcosm of our country and where it's going.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up.
And the Republican Party has not recognized that when creating policy.
But that's not really what's going on. I mean, I lived in D.C. as a kid, and it was a majority black city. and the city government was majority African American. Do you think they were making less good decisions because they were almost all one color?
I don't know, but I do know that.
Oh, but wait a second. I thought you said that's always bad.
I don't know. I didn't study D.C. politics from the Marion Barry
if the Congress were 90% black, would it be making bad decisions? What are you saying?
What I do know is that those policies represented the greater diversity that we've seen in our country. The Republican Party, if you look at the representatives at the leadership of their party, and listen, I'm friends with Will Hurd. I have great faith in Mia Love and what they contribute to the Republican Party, but they are not right now at the top-ranking decision makers of leadership.
Okay, but you're not allowing for the possibility that people are individuals and they reach their own conclusions, not necessarily in reference to the group, whatever group you think they belong to, but because they're each one created by God to make his own choices.
This is not individually about race. This is about a lack of ideological diversity. It's a lack of diversity of perspective, and it's a lack of diversity of experience.
Those are all real arguments. The race part is grotesque, I would say.
It's not. Race is a part of diversity. Ideological diversity, gender diversity, diversity of perspective, and diversity of experience. And you have to take that diversity of experience into account when making policy as important as health care.
Okay, so I guess what concerns me here is we're opening up a can of worms. And I get part of what you're saying, because I do think a diversity of perspective and background and opinion is really important. I believe that. And I've staffed the companies I've run that way. But I also think that if you're creating a rhetorical dynamic where it's okay to attack people because of their skin color, which is exactly what Debbie Dingell was doing, it's exactly what Andrea Mitchell was doing.
She said white boy.
Then that's going to... White boy,
and that's
really?
a bad statement.
What the hell is that?
That is a statement that someone of her stature and someone who's been in the game as long as she has, a congresswoman, should know better than that.
How about
I would not use the phrase white boy. But I disagree with the premise that these people are being attacked because of their skin color. The Republican Party and the policy that emanates therefrom is being attacked because it per se doesn't include substantial diversity that looks like the country.
Okay, so I'm just saying, and I'm sure this has occurred to you, but if you have a political conversation where one group is starting to attack another group on the basis of its race, that you could wind up with a country where all groups start attacking other groups on the basis of theirs. You could wind up with a really divided, dangerously so, country.
That's a nasty slope to go down, but I think we disagree on the premise that people are being attacked on the basis of race. I think we're being attacked. Democrats are pointing out, rightfully so, the lack of racial diversity in the Republican Party decision-making structure writ large. Right. And that's not wrong to point out.
Okay, look, it's an obvious question. If you had a jury that was 100% Samoan, would it be able to reach a just conclusion?
As an attorney, I would say that that's, if my client was not Samoan, I would say that he probably or she probably didn't get a jury of his peers.
I don't want to live in a country like that. Now, Obama, the former president, comes out recently, I think today, and says race relations have never been better in America. And I know that when you've been the president, you want to think you left the country a better place than you found it.
Sure.
But that's just a flat-out lie. And why should we have... I mean, there's no measure by which that's true. And if we're having this conversation now, it suggests that it's not only not true, it's ridiculous.
Well, the premise here, and it seems like the premise for the entire discussion we're having, is that white America is under attack. And that's what I find to be fundamentally not true.
But I'm not making the case that white America is under attack. I'm making the case that the society that you want to live in, and all of us should be trying to live in, is one in which people are judged by what they do.
The content of
by the choices that they make.
Absolutely.
And not judged by immutable characteristics over which they have no control, such as their race or their height, or their eye color for that matter. And that Democratic leaders, liberal leaders, are all of a sudden forgetting that lesson and pushing this race stuff on the country.
Race is immutable. It is an immutable characteristic. You're absolutely right. What we do have control over is how many people we include when making policy and when making real decisions that are going to affect all of us, not just white males. And the Republican Party, I have dear Republican friends across the board, but writ large in concerning the leadership who's in charge of making policy that emanates from not only the federal government but in the states, they have failed at the concept of including everyone at the table.
Would you acknowledge that people of the same color can have dramatically different views while remaining authentic?
Absolutely.
So you look at Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who is attacked for daring to have views that are different from the majority of people who look like him. That's awful.
I don't think he's attacked for daring to have views that are different from African Americans. You look at Senator Tim Scott, and he has the wide and broad respect of the African American community, and he is a staunchly conservative Republican. I've known him from years when he was in Columbia in the state legislature. So I think that Clarence Thomas is a very special case with the vitriol with which he's chosen to carry out a lot of his policies. And he's a hard man to understand.
Yeah, I think he's gotten most of the vitriol. And finally, I would ask you this. When you're a public servant, do you think that you have a duty to represent your fellow citizens first, second, and third? Or do you think you have a duty to represent people who look like you, too?
I think that you have a duty to represent your fellow citizens, which is the problem.
Thank you.
Which is the problem with the Republican Party not including everyone, because black folks are their fellow citizens, too. Gay and lesbian folks are their fellow citizens, too.
I'm not here to defend the Republican Party, which I think is really damaged and silly in a lot of ways. But I got to be completely honest, it's a little much, considering the Democratic Party has officially exclusionary policies based on race for how it chooses delegates, for how it allocates power, for how it sends money, and certainly in the presidential nominating contest, you can't imagine that that's not a massive factor in who gets chosen. So,
at the end of the day, the leadership is chosen by a popular and proper vote. However, the Democratic Party has chosen to put in institutional measures to rectify historical inadequacies and historical mistreatment. So, you know, does that mean that it's based upon race? To some degree, yes. But ultimately, the Democratic Party has said that we want diverse representation, and we'll take measures to foster that.
Don, thanks for coming on, sir.
Good man. Thanks, Tucker.